Last night, I dreamt I went back to Georgia, up to Colorado, across to Cornwall, and when I woke up, I remembered I'm just a mail-order groom who lives in a cage. It is not very nice. Welcome to Channel 8 and a Half. Hello, and thank you for joining us at Channel 8 and a Half, a show about movies and TV and pop culture. My name is Joe Galena.
And I'm Andrew Hanna.
Andrew, how are you doing this fine October day?
Joe, I'm doing great. Today is Watchlist Volume 9, and we'll be discussing Netflix's adaptation of Alfred Hitchcock's film Rebecca with Lily James and Armie Hammer, as well as the follow-up to The Shining, Dr. Sleep with Ewan McGregor. And we'll wrap up with something very nice with Borat, Subsequent Moviefilm. I had to do it.
I shake my head in disgust. I mean, granted, I did just reference it in the intro of this episode, but that's not the point.
So let's go ahead and jump into Rebecca. You've seen the original, correct?
I have seen the original, yeah.
Okay, so I watched the original. I found it on YouTube. You can actually find the whole thing on YouTube because I couldn't find it on anything else.
No, very difficult to find. It is difficult to find. It's really hard to actually order a DVD of it too, but it is on YouTube. The whole thing is on YouTube. I've seen it before. I actually rewatched it for this as well.
Yeah.
After watching the remake. And it's strange in that it's a very faithful remake of not supposedly the movie, the Hitchcock movie, but that's what Ben Wheatley, the director, said. He goes, we're going to try to remake the book. We don't want to be compared to the Hitchcock movie. And I'm like, man, you can't get away from it. And it is very similar.
Even just the opening monologue from Lily James.
That's the opening line of the book too. And that's one of the most famous opening lines of the book is last night I dreamt I was at Mandalay again. I think I paraphrase that, but it is very similar, and you can't have a remake of Rebecca without having that line. And that's kind of the problem, is that it's such an iconic, not only line, it was also one of the most popular books of its time.
Yeah.
Very subversive book, but the movie, the Hitchcock movie, is so revered. It's the only Alfred Hitchcock movie to win Best Picture.
Yeah, see, that was surprising to me because I didn't like this one as much as I liked Alfred Hitchcock's later work. Wasn't this on the tail end of his British era? Like when he came to the United States?
This was his first movie that he made coming to America.
Oh, really? Okay,
yes.
So this was
But so much of it, this was post-Britain Alfred Hitchcock, but so much of it is British. And obviously Laurence Olivier plays Maxim de Winter in this one, where he was most famous for playing Hamlet on the stage. So, what is British, what is American at that point? If you haven't seen Rebecca, I'll summarize it very quickly. Just the IMDb summary, really. A young newlywed arrives at her husband's imposing family estate on a windswept English coast and finds herself battling the shadow of his first wife, Rebecca, whose legacy lives on in the house long after her death. Now that makes it sound a lot like a ghost story.
Well, I was going to say, you didn't click on the wrong episode. You are not listening to the Crimson Peak episode.
See,
you are on the correct one.
I'm glad that you brought it up because I was going to talk about that too.
Yeah.
But that makes it sound like a very spooky ghost story, which you could make the argument it is a ghost story. Rebecca haunts the main character, who does not even get a name. She is just referred to as the second Mrs. De Winter, in a way that a ghost would.
Yeah, Mrs. Danvers, I feel as though, is Rebecca's surrogate. It does sort of feel like a ghost story. It almost reminded me a little bit of Rosemary's Baby, where you're unsure of the intentions of the people around her, and she's sort of slowly breaking down. Even the house has a personality, and it's this foreboding, overbearing presence, and
very much
the windows have the same eyes as Mrs. Danvers that stare at Lily James as she walks down the hall. And I think that is in large part why it was reminiscent of Crimson Peak, but also that they both live within the same genre of gothic romance.
Yeah. What did you think of this remake?
I didn't mind as much as I think people did.
So you liked it?
I didn't. I liked it enough.
Your hesitation, I'm going to cut you off. I'm sorry, but your hesitation, I think, says exactly what you want to say.
Yeah.
Because you went, it's fine. And it is fine. And it's a perfectly fine thing to watch. But I didn't love it. And I didn't think it was amazing. But it's not bad by any means.
Exactly. It's good, not great.
Yeah. Which is the problem, is that it could have been so much more. And Ben Wheatley, the guy who directed it, he is known for going very big. Very extreme. Two of his most famous works, Kill List and High Rise, are both extremely outlandish and very outlandish in terms of bigness. Kill List has an ending that I'm not going to spoil, but is very, very shocking and some might say appalling. And High Rise definitely has that tone as well. And so going from those two to Rebecca, which is very tame almost in comparison, I was surprised by.
I will say, I think the reason why I like this a little bit more than most people did was because I watched the original right before I watched this. I can see the contrast, and I honestly didn't like the original as much. I thought that Mrs. De Winter's character was very kind of shallow and useless in a way.
In the first one?
Yeah, in the first one.
But you see, this is where we're going to disagree. This is fun. That is the point of her. And that is why I didn't like the remake as much. And Lily James in it, Lily James is perfectly serviceable in the role, but she's also stunning. The whole point of the second Mrs. De Winter is that she's everything that Rebecca is not, right? She's supposed to be meek and plain and feeble, and Lily James is anything but that, right? She's never convincing as the companion to Ann Dowd's very boorish, socialite character. I never bought her at all.
I don't know that I agree with that, because I think that Lily James is not conventionally pretty.
Oh, I disagree.
No, I think she's beautiful. However, not in the typical Hollywood way, like the girl next door. Whereas the other characters seem to allude to Rebecca being conventionally beautiful, especially considering the juxtaposition between her and Armie Hammer, who very much has the look of the typical Hollywood leading man. He helped sell Lily James to me as sort of the girl next door. Even while watching the original with Joan Fontaine, it did occur to me that Lily James would fit that character very well.
But I think that Joan Fontaine's performance is very timid. They do that a lot with her wardrobe. They do that a lot with the camera placement. Hitchcock does that, when this second Mrs. De Winter comes to Manderley for the first time and she's introduced to the staff. She's introduced to Mrs. Danvers for the first time. She is wet and she's shivering from the rain. Hitchcock has her very placed in the center of the frame and she's looking up at everybody. Point. She's very weak the whole time. I never got any of that weakness from Lily James's performance or Ben Wheatley's direction, or maybe, to be fair.
And I didn't mind that so much because modern day audiences wouldn't be able to connect with the original sort of meek and nimble Mrs. De Winters. However, despite that, I thought Lily James struck a good balance between the sophisticated humility that comes with true struggle or tribulation from the loss of both her parents just days apart, or just being a working class person, but then also coming off as naive within the world of high society.
See, I didn't get that at all. I never thought that she was naive to anything. I didn't think she was clumsy enough in the beginning. She wasn't, sort of out of her elements enough. Now, I will say that Ben Wheatley did do a great job making you feel bad for her, especially in the beginning when Ann Dowd and all of her friends, the socialite women in Monte Carlo, are just making fun of her. And you do feel so bad for her. She's so good. She only gets to be in this for 15, 20 minutes, but she is amazing at being so catty.
Good in everything, especially Handmaid's Tale. And she was also in the end of Hereditary. She plays that type so well, where her maliciousness is communicated through the voice of a sweet old woman. But going back to Lily James, she had her moments of being out of her element. And I almost liked it more that the feeling of fish out of water wasn't necessarily communicated through stupidity and clumsiness. Instead, you had moments like Danvers asking her what sauce she wants to put on the menu, and she has no idea, like what would pair well. Or when she orders oysters for breakfast. And probably my favorite moment, which was also in the original, when she drops her gloves and immediately bends down to pick them up, as Danvers does as well. And you see Danvers take note that she humbled herself enough to pick up her own gloves, which is a simple moment, but it's a subtle tell that she doesn't fit within that world.
What did you think of Armie Hammer? I never really believed Armie Hammer as the brooding, mopey sad boy that is Maxime de Winter. He is way too put together. Like, he's not sad. Maxime is supposed to be, very depressed about the passing of Rebecca, and wasn't she wonderful, and I'm so sad about it. And granted, look, in the very beginning, it's very earnest, and he's wearing a very big yellow suit, and he looks like a sexy bottle of mustard. But I never once believed it felt hollow to me.
I will say it felt more hollow when he tells Lily James that he killed Rebecca. That was not believable.
Right.
I didn't believe that he could be pushed to that end. Whereas Laurence Olivier, I think, played that part a little bit better.
Olivier played Hamlet, and Hamlet is on the Mount Rushmore of mopey sad boys. Maxime de Winter is, that's in Olivier's wheelhouse right there. Oh yeah, I guess we're spoiling Rebecca. Sorry. It's been out for 80 years.
Yeah. I like the whole Great Gatsby feel. I thought they didn't push it too far. It really did feel like an earnest period piece.
It was very earnest, especially in the
Yeah.
beginning. Everybody is so earnest in this. Again, very strangely, it's played extremely straight in the very beginning. When they are in Monte Carlo, everything is played like a straightforward romantic drama. And then only after they get to Mandalay the color palette changes. There's no more sexy mustard suits for Armie Hammer. Everything's very gray. Mrs. Danvers is all in black, and she's all very tragic and sad also.
For as much as I love Ann Dowd, I almost like the original Mrs. Van Hopper. I thought she was perfect in her nonchalantly just terrible.
Yeah.
Like when she says the way that you were trying to butt your way into the conversation, the girl did not say anything but answer Laurence Olivier's question. And I think just that part of it, I thought she played perfect. And Dowd, for as great as she was, her character was very overt. Kristen Scott Thomas plays
Mrs. Danvers, and she's the best part of this movie, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. Well, I like Lily James. I really did. Maybe I just like Lily James as an actress.
That's because you love Baby Driver.
I love Baby Driver, and honestly, it had a lot to do with her as well.
I thought the best parts about this movie were Kristen Scott Thomas as Mrs. Danvers and Lily James's character, the second Mrs. De Winter. When they were on screen together, that's when this movie shined.
Yeah.
I thought they were the best part of it because, the second Mrs. De Winter is so naive and so just befuddled the whole time. Mrs. Danvers is just playing her around like a marionette puppet. And, Kristen Scott Thomas is all angles and shadows in this movie, and she's always just sort of like lurking around, and she just appears out of nowhere behind Mrs. De Winter.
I will say I almost like the original relationship between Danvers and Mrs. De Winters, in that De Winters was originally far less suspicious of Danvers. Whereas in this, I feel like Mrs. De Winters was a bit more aggressive toward her, which did downplay her vulnerability in that sort of unknown world.
It was much more menacing, I think, in this remake too. Kristen Scott Thomas does a great menacing Mrs. Danvers. In the original, it was more sort of
subtle,
more of just like a normal conversation. This one, you almost felt like, is Mrs. Danvers going to rip her hair out?
Yeah.
Because there's a moment where she's, brushing her hair, and it gets caught, and she yanks it back, and Mrs. De Winter screams a little bit, and I was like, oh, hello. Is this where a murder occurs? They're really going off script now. I really liked Sam Riley as Jack Favel as well. He doesn't get a ton of screen time. I almost wanted...
Everyone looks like the original characters.
Right? Don't they? I mean, Armie Hammer doesn't
Other than Armie Hammer.
Yeah, Armie Hammer doesn't really...
He just needed a pencil mustache to really complete the look.
But that's the thing, Sam Riley... I almost want Sam Riley to have played that part. I think if Sam Riley had played Maxime, the movie probably would have been better.
Yeah, no, I would actually agree with that. He does. He looks like Laurence Olivier.
He does look like Olivier, but he has a very sort of roguish charm, and there's a roughness to him that I thought came out a lot more than Armie Hammer. Now, maybe, again, that's the part that they were playing, and I really like Sam Riley in a movie called Control. He played Ian Curtis, who was the lead singer of Joy Division. So I really like him to begin with, so maybe that's why I'm a little biased. I like Armie Hammer, though, too. I do like Armie Hammer, but I think he's definitely best suited for roles that he kind of gets to be a scumbag. Like, at the end of Sorry to Bother You, where he plays the
right.
CEO.
He was in that. I forgot about that.
And again, I don't want to spoil the twist of Sorry to Bother You because you got to go into that movie not knowing the twist.
I love that movie.
And maybe even me saying there's a twist ruins it for some people, but...
No, I don't know, man. The twist of Sorry to Bother You is pretty out there.
True. Maybe it doesn't matter.
But continue, yeah.
But Armie Hammer in that role was great. Even
the
as
sleazy billionaire type.
He's so attractive, and he looks like a real life Ken doll, but he's also kind of a sleazebag.
He could play the devil.
Yes. He would make a wonderful devil.
Perfectly attractive that draws you in, only to find just scum inside. And I think he was right for the beginning. I thought he was far more charming, and you were even drawn to him. Like, I love the sequences with the notes and things like that. I think I liked them falling in love, which is natural, right? You have so much more to work with
Shot
nowadays.
So beautifully in Monte Carlo.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, they take advantage of Monte Carlo.
That last shot where Sam Riley's standing outside of the court and he says, "You think you got away with this?" And the sun's rising in the background. It looks so artificial, but artificial artificial in this beautiful way. Like, it felt like you were watching a movie, which was kind of cool. Yeah, I think it embodied the aesthetic very well. I think overall it was all right, but it's not something I would watch again or would have watched if it wasn't for the podcast.
No.
Like, I don't know who I would recommend this to.
That's the thing, right? It's weird to think, would I recommend this to somebody? And I'd go, if you want to compare it to the original Rebecca, then go have at it. Go nuts. It doesn't stand on its own.
Yeah, exactly. It's most interesting when you're comparing the two. It felt as though it would have been really interesting is if Armie Hammer was a scumbag and terrible and meant to kill her in a really messed up way, and maybe she was pregnant.
And she's like, I'm in.
Yeah, Mrs. De Winters is so taken by him because that's what it felt like. I mean, Joan Fontaine played that part really well, where she just heard her husband did some messed up things. I struck her and she fell and all this stuff or whatever. And she's like, oh, we'll get through this. Don't worry. She's like a ride or die, Whereas Lily James,
you wanted Lily James to be like, all right, man, if we're gonna do some murders, let's get some things straight. We got to cover this up better going forward.
I wanted the couple from The Lie is what I wanted.
Oh, right.
Running over the girl's dad and wiping the blood off of the car together.
No
just like family Sunday activity.
He just comes to her and goes, well, I've killed someone else. And she goes, all right, well, I mean, who do we have to throw in the sea now?
Where's the Windex?
True. It would have been a more of a shocking ending.
Yeah. No, and I think that would have been more interesting. It would have been more compelling. Now, people like Lily James and Armie Hammer, you can't really depict them that way. Maybe Armie Hammer a little bit, but Lily James.
That'd be a great sequel. Just Armie Hammer and Lily James as old-timey Bonnie and Clyde going around knocking over banks and whatnot.
I think that's what would have made this a little bit more compelling. Because if they were a little bit more
left and right.
No, if they were just more flawed in a way. In the original, because I didn't actually watch the end of the Hitchcock one. I only watched up until a point, and I was like, okay, I just need to get to the new one. It ends the same. Mrs. Danvers burns down the house, I assume, right?
But it ends, the ending scene is the house burning down. Manderley burning down. Mrs. Danvers going up in flames in the house because of her love for Rebecca.
Which would have made more sense than her jumping off of the cliff at the end, in my opinion.
I agree. I didn't like that she jumped off the cliff.
It didn't make any sense.
Burned down the house because she loved Rebecca so much, and Rebecca was so integral to Manderley that her going down with Manderley made sense.
And Manderley was Rebecca, and Mrs. Danvers always wanted to be with Rebecca. And I guess it would make sense if you're thinking of it as like, oh, she wanted to die the same way as Rebecca, but I guess actually Rebecca didn't die that way. She didn't actually drown, so it seems like one of those arbitrary changes that they wanted to make just to make it a little bit different.
Thematically, the Hitchcock version, it made sense.
I agree with
never read the book. I don't know if maybe she does throw herself off a cliff in the book, but
no, she burns up with Manderley.
Oh, does she? I didn't know.
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
See, I didn't know that, but thematically, it makes sense.
This is probably the best Hitchcock to remake. I don't know that I want to see. I mean, we've seen Rear Window in a way.
Now you have thrown down a question that I have to ponder. Keep going. Do you mean Disturbia as the Rear Window semi-remake of Rear Window?
Yeah, that was more inspired by. I don't think it's a remake.
It's not a remake.
Like, I would never want
to
see.
It is Rear Window.
Like this didn't feel like a Hitchcock film, the original at least.
Not what you think of as
Hitchcock. You can tell Hitchcock directed this because of the subjective perspective of the camera and the general paranoia, but it didn't feel as though it fit within his body of work.
Well, no, when you think of Hitchcock, you think of horror, you think of Psycho and The Birds and Rear Window and Vertigo and even North by Northwest, which kind of doesn't fit into that Hitchcock mold either, but it's so iconic that you just accept it.
No, but even then, North by Northwest was similar to The Man Who Knew Too Much.
Paranoid thrillers.
Sort of the man on the run, mistaken identity. But Rebecca felt very different. I didn't feel like I was necessarily watching a Hitchcock film. And maybe that's why it was the only one that won an Oscar.
No, but it's very Oscar baity as well. Even in 1940, it's a romantic drama. It's starring a Shakespearean actor. It makes sense that this would be the only thing that would win. Well, Hitchcock
for the time.
Hitchcock didn't win Best Director, but it would win Best Picture because everything else is kind of pulpy, kind of B movie-ish. They're not Oscar things that you hold up. Ooh, grandiose. This is great drama. Psycho is about a dude with mommy issues killing people. That doesn't win Oscars.
It was lowbrow at the time. No one wanted to make Psycho.
It was considered tacky almost.
Yeah.
And then it made a ton of money, and Hitchcock was like, that's fine, I'll take your tacky because I'm going to make it rain.
He didn't make it rain. He just bought his house back.
Yeah, that's true.
That's crazy.
Isn't it though? I mean, he made so much. He got points on the back end of his Psycho too.
He did, but
It's insane.
Homeboy mortgaged his house to make
Yeah.
that film. I mean,
I've been thinking about your question, by the way.
yeah.
Is this the best Hitchcock remake? And it might be by default, but a lot of things are so inspired by Hitchcock that are much better that's probably the way that you should go.
Yeah, you don't want to go with a Psycho or
why would you remake Rebecca, which won Best Picture and is considered a cinema classic? There's nowhere to go. There's no point. The best you can do is what we just saw, which is, yeah, it's kind of hollow, but it's not as good.
I mean, I think it was improving on the story in terms of modernity because you couldn't get away with the original Rebecca today. Given how weak and uninteresting Mrs. De Winters was, you can't have a female character's motivation completely revolve around a man and have her be so two-dimensional. Overall, though, I mean, I'd give this a meh.
I agree. A meh is a completely fair tone to take with this movie.
Like, I didn't hate it, but it didn't feel as though my life was improved in any way by watching it. However, speaking of things that I felt as though improved my life greatly, and I'm almost thankful it was created, I want to move on to Dr. Sleep, the follow-up to The Shining.
You liked Dr. Sleep that much?
The third act wasn't my favorite. I will say up until the third act, I was loving it. I was enjoying myself so much. I thought it was so much fun, and this is exactly what I like to see from sequels. But I'm actually curious, did you like this?
I did like it. I liked it quite a bit. And I liked it for the same reason that when we talked about Trainspotting 2 a number of episodes ago, it does the same exact thing. Actually, with Ewan McGregor is in both too, is that it's a sequel that
isn't the same story.
Is not the same story and does not try to take the same tone.
Exactly.
As the first one.
If anything, it felt like an adventure film than horror because I was somewhat dreading watching this.
I know you were.
Yeah, because for as great as The Shining is, it's not a light, fun watch. It's heavy and uncomfortable. Whereas Dr. Sleep was so much fun because it built upon the lore established by the first film. Because The Shining didn't really go into the ability of Shining.
It was more about Jack Nicholson going insane than Danny's telekinetic Shining ability.
Like, it didn't occur to me that all the ghosts and the Overlook Hotel was basically reacting to Danny's presence. I thought they were just sort of a coincidence because that was how it was played out. Yeah, exactly. Like, Danny just happened to have powers and he's at this place and that's where he learns about his powers because it's sort of, they're tied together in a way. But I didn't know that it was a cause and effect type situation where they were literally feeding off of Danny's energy.
Mm-hmm.
And this, I felt, explained that far more and was very interesting.
It goes much more into the lore of The Shining, the act of Shining.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know, Dr. Sleep is the sequel to The Shining. Obviously, it follows a now adult Danny who is living, he's an alcoholic, you know, kind of living in squalor because he's trying to squash his shining ability. And he meets up with this young girl who also has the ability to shine. At the same time, there's a cult of energy vampires, I guess you'd call them, called the True Knot.
They're honestly like the Hocus Pocus witches. Literally.
They are the Hocus Pocus witches.
Drinking the smoke or the steam, whatever they call it from the children.
Yeah, they call the energy that people who can shine steam, and
it's like their life force.
Yeah, their life force. They suck it out of them, and that's how they eat. You know, and it's all a ritual, and you see their eyes go bright white as they're sucking the steam out of them. Mm-hmm. But all three of these things, Danny, this young girl named Abra, and then the cult called the True Knot, which is led by a character named Rose the Hat, who's played by Rebecca Ferguson, and I really liked her performance.
Dude, she was so good.
All sort of combine, you know, and come together, and it's how they intersect. I also really liked this movie. It plays on similar themes as Rebecca too, of the past, being haunted by your past, not being able to escape it, things like that.
It's very much about addiction. Even just the act of drinking alcohol looked like the act of drinking the steam in a way. Can I just say, I don't think I realized how much I like Ewan McGregor until this. This, for some reason, made me realize he is one of my favorite actors.
His turn as young Obi-Wan Kenobi in Attack of the Clones did not do that for you?
I loved him in Star Wars, but there's a lot to distract from Ewan McGregor, my friend.
He's the only one that comes out of those movies unscathed. The entire tone of this, by the way, with the True Knot and the addition of the vampires, I was very wary of it in the beginning. Because the movie opens with that in 1980 and the True Knot finding
a little girl,
someone who shines. I was very wary of it in the beginning. I was like, "What is this energy vampires nonsense?" And Rose the Hat, and she's doing magic.
I can see why you were weary, but I think that it was important for them to have that scene open the film because it properly articulated the tone, because it's an introduction of telling you this is not the same film. This is very different. And I thought it was important that they did that. And I like that they did. I agree in that I was like, okay, well, how good can they make this? And it wasn't until they met Snake by Andy that I was like, oh, I like this a lot because I loved her character as well.
Did you feel like her character was a bit wasted?
I think that they should have done a lot more with her because the way that she was introduced to us was that she was going to be the one to kind of take down the cult in a sense from the inside out. And really all she did was act as the audience's surrogate to the cult to basically explain things too.
But I think being able to talk about this, I want to talk about the end, but you can't do that without going into spoilers. So
yeah, I think we should go into spoilers.
If you haven't seen Dr. Sleep, I recommend it. I think it's fantastic. It's long and it's contemplative and it has a very different tone than The Shining. It's almost more like a drama for basically the first half.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it's a horror film. Like
basically a drama with people who can do magic sometimes.
Yeah, but yeah, let's move on into spoilers. I'll put timestamps in the description below. And here we go.
Did you think they spent too much time when they get to the Overlook Hotel just wandering around the hotel? Danny spends a lot of time just walking around hallways, and we go back
there
to all the famous places. We see the elevator with the blood coming out, and we see where the little girls go, "Play with us, Danny." And Lloyd the bartender, he's back, except he looks like Jack Nicholson because it's, meant to be a father-son thing where Danny's also drinking like his dad did. And that Jack Nicholson impersonator, I did not buy him as Nicholson, but that's fine.
Oh, I agree. It's the voice. It was honestly, his look wouldn't have bothered me as much as if he just got the voice right.
Yeah.
But I appreciate that they didn't feel the need to CGI all the old actors into this.
That being said, I did want to see Nicholson's frozen corpse just still there.
That would have been really cool.
Just chilling, still frozen. Just in the maze.
Ewan McGregor's mom, what's her name?
Oh, the actress who plays, she plays Shelley Duvall in there.
She did her so well.
Yeah. They actually use some of the old dialogue though, and they loop it in.
Oh, really? Because her intonation was on point, everything about the rhythm of her speech, and even her look. I was like, oh, that actually looks pretty close.
Looks very convincing, much more convincing than the Nicholson guy.
I almost appreciated that they kind of maintained the limits of cinema in the time that the original Shining was made.
I thought Carl Lumbly did a great Dick Halloran.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I really liked him.
Oh, I really liked him a lot too. And I thought
bringing
him back really, I don't know, maybe it hit the nostalgia button for me of going, hey, it's guy played Scatman Crothers, and he calls him Doc.
Yeah.
Oh, isn't that nice? And having him be the sort of spirit guide, for this movie, for Danny, I really enjoyed. And
I think it tied it together without it feeling as though they were trying to
bash you over the head.
Yeah, exactly. Because you really did need him to come back in a way, because the movie is so different than the original that you needed someone as iconic as him to sort of weave it together in a way.
I mean, that's one of the themes of the movie is everything kind of comes around. I liked the symmetry of it.
No, I agree. And I loved Kylie Curran.
She was very good.
Or Curran.
I liked her performance a lot.
So phenomenal. She wasn't overstated like a lot of child actors can be. Like, I felt like the girl from Black Box, one of our recent films that we were talking about, the Blumhouse movies, the girl from Black Box was over the top, a little bit too much. She was phenomenal. Even when she would smile a certain way, a very specific smile, she looked like she had a dark side to her, which I appreciated, is that she did have a sort of vengeful type of personality at times where she's like, I hope it hurts you, or she deserved it, that kind of stuff. And so you see that come out in her smile. And I thought that she was so good and charming, and her chemistry with Ewan McGregor was great. I loved seeing them on screen together and their sort of interaction. And Ewan McGregor also didn't overplay the brooding type.
Drunk, like, I'm just a sad alcoholic.
Yeah. He played it just right on. Like, I love the moments where he's sort of starting to rediscover his shining. And when he's at the hospice facility and the cat that always goes into the room of a patient right before their death, almost helping him find his purpose, and how he and the cat comfort the patients in their final moments.
I did also like that they didn't beat you over the head with the Shining references. There are plenty of them.
Yeah.
And I do think it went a little bit too overindulgent on the cross dissolves to be like The Shining.
I was thinking that toward the end, yeah.
But there's moments where when Dan starts to first use his shining ability again right before he gets the job in the hospice place, he's talking to Bruce Greenwood, and it's basically a shot-for-shot remake
The same office.
of Nicholson in the office
Yeah.
when he gets the job to go to the Overlook Hotel. But then that is really the first time that, break into getting the job is when Dan
Mhm.
starts to use his powers again, which is a reference to the
Yeah.
Overlook Hotel. So it makes
Yeah.
sense.
Well, and it's almost as though it could have easily been in his head as replaying his father's experience in the Overlook.
Potentially.
Because this was about kind of echoes in time or, the remnants of the past in a sense, and that's what The Shining was about as well, and so it almost makes sense that he superimposed himself in the same situation in the Overlook Hotel.
You know what I respected though? Abra's acceptance of calling it The Shining immediately.
Oh, yeah.
Danny explains, "I call it The Shining." She's like, "Yep, cool. All right, so I've got The Shining too." I'm like, "You really went with this."
Well, yeah, because she was probably like, "Okay, magic is not right, but that's all I know about it." And other one, she's like, the magician, she's like, "I can do that." He's like, "All right, that's sweet, kid. Like, shut the hell up. Let me do my magic show." But to go back to what you were saying about when they went back to the Overlook Hotel, I agree in that they did meander too much in the halls. They were going to go back to those locations anyway.
Mm,
When Abra sees the twins, when Rose sees the blood in the elevator,
yes.
like you could have just held off a little bit because you could argue it was redundant, but I think thematically it makes sense because he even says, "I need to wake it up." And that sequence, in a way, reawakened it in us as well, how it felt to be in the Overlook Hotel. So I didn't mind it as much because you were given a moment of quiet to sort of reminisce on the iconic hotel as Danny was also calling back to the last time he was there.
Did you like that the True Knot basically didn't matter and that they all just get killed off right before the third act? Because it kind of seems like the True Knot, and we can maybe get into Snakebite Andy's character too. It felt like they were a little wasted and that it just became Rose the Hat versus Danny and Abra.
I don't think it bothered me, but I understand why you asked that. Did it bother you?
It felt like a little bit of a wasted opportunity, or I don't know if a wasted opportunity, but just that their entire deal was we're going to live forever. And then they just all get killed immediately in one scene. In one scene,
It was very quick, yeah.
Billy, played by Cliff Curtis, who's very good also, and I really liked him. They just lure him out into the woods, and it was a fun trick that they play with Abra, using her shining ability to lure them out with the
Yeah.
bear.
Yeah.
But just going, okay, now you're all dead. And then Cliff Curtis also dying, and I knew he was going to die. He had to die too.
Dude, that scene.
Yes, kill yourself. I was like, oh,
Oh my god. And I was like, no, 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 no. But I love that it was, again, an instant. I think I like moments that are so swift that you don't even have a chance to process it as it's happening. Like when he turns around, it really is just within 2 seconds he just shoots himself. And it's so quick and insignificant. It was 2 words that killed him.
her ability to do that, I thought was a little bit underutilized because she's can manipulate people or make them do things with her mind. Snakebite Andy can, but it
Yeah,
does
I
it
mean,
basically twice.
these are not the droids you're looking for.
Basically, that's what it
Yeah.
is.
But I love, like, I think that was so interesting that she literally lures in pedophiles and marks them on their
Yeah,
cheek and then just takes their money. Like, I think that that's a really interesting kind of thing for her to do in the beginning, which is why I thought she was going to do more. But anything further than that
would have felt like too much.
would have felt like too much, but I could have gone through a whole movie about their backstories.
Yeah,
I thought they were going to go through all their stories. That was initially where I thought they were going because it really did seem like the beginning of an X-Men movie where you're going through everyone starting to discover their powers in a way.
if you're Danny and you move into that room where you're trying to escape the Shining, and yet weird magical writing starts appearing on the walls, don't you hightail it out of there? And you're going, nope, no, sir, no, thank you. I did this when I was 8 years old. I know how this story ends. And he was there for 8 years.
No, because you know that he has spent his life dealing with this. Like, I love the moment where he sees Scatman Crothers for the first time after 8 years, and he's like, "Do you still get visits from
The
the
old
old
crowd.
ghosts in a sense?" Yeah, the old crowd. I like that he just found a way to deal with it. He was basically a Ghostbuster for 8 years and was just locking them up little by little. So he's used to it. Like, I love when he wakes up next to that girl that he picks up at the bar and she had thrown up on the bed.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh my God. But I didn't know that they were going to have her come back and say, no one's found us. That was so well done. It was a perfect setup for Scatman to say, basically, you have a debt that needs to be paid. But it's like scenes like that where I was like, okay, that's good plant. and it paid off.
Mhm.
And I didn't expect it to pay off. I thought it was just a really cool addition, and it paid off in the end when he says, "You still have to make up for that."
What do you think the shelf life is, though, for Weird Soul Essence? Because that girl that they sucked the soul out of in 1980 lasted until 2011, which I think is when this movie is set, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly.
It is 2011, yeah.
So that's a long time. How have they been running out? Like, and they had a lot of canisters left. I mean, what's the
You
shelf life
know
here? Like, you can't keep a can of tuna in your cabinet for, over 8 years. Otherwise, if you eat it, you get mercury poisoning and die or something.
I was actually gonna comment about that because I actually really like the idea that there is so much less steam out there, and I love when he's like, "I don't know if it's the phones or
Yeah.
what it is," but I like the idea that because of the modern day aversion to spirituality and the inclination to suppress any inkling of the supernatural, it slowly dwindled it in the world. And so just like anything, if left dormant or unpracticed, it will just wither away. And that was their source of food. So in a world where people have an aversion to spirituality, I loved when Danny even set that up. He said, I've met a lot of people who have a little bit of the shining, but no one who's known that they had it, because most people will not concede that possibility within themselves
To be
so as not to
fair,
feel
most people
crazy.
also don't get chased down by their alcoholic father with an axe.
True.
You know.
No, but I think that was explained and justified. In my opinion, I thought that was a very good inclusion, is that they just aren't finding as many people
Mhm.
because people are less likely to give into the afterlife or the supernatural, that kind of thing. And that scene with the little boy from, what was the recent movie that he was in?
Which one?
He was a little boy that, like, when they steal
Baseball playing boy?
they have the drone. Yeah, the number 19. Yeah, that kid.
Oh, I didn't know he's in anything else. What have you seen him in?
Oh, Jacob Tremblay. He was in Room. Oh,
Oh,
Good Boys.
that was Jacob Tremblay who played that? I didn't
Yeah.
realize
Yeah.
that.
It looked like they made it a while ago because he looked much younger than he was in Good Boys.
Maybe. Oh, I didn't even realize that. I did respect Rose the Hat, though, when he says, "Is it gonna hurt?" And she goes, "Yep, gonna hurt. Not even gonna lie to you." I was like, "Good for you, Rose the Hat. Good for being straight up about it."
All on the up and up.
Yeah, right? Like, you're a crazy energy witch, but you're a straight shooter, and I like that.
But I think that scene was very effective. Like, it was difficult to watch
It was
him sort
brutal to
of, yeah,
watch.
it was very brutal, and he did a good job to sell it. Like, you could have easily been just a kid squirming on the ground screaming. I mean, you really did feel as though he was being tortured and
Oh,
dying,
yeah.
and it was hard to watch.
It was effective.
Yeah.
Rebecca Ferguson's so good in this too.
I love the little speech that she gives the old man where she's basically like,
You've watched empires
yeah,
fall.
like, that was really cool, and it gives you a scope of how long these people can live for.
Snakebite Andy really got the short end of the stick. She was only alive, like, she was still, like,
She
15 years old.
she could have been fine with not just giving her soul up in a way. But, yeah, overall, I really like this. The ending could have been a little bit better. It felt a little bit fan servicey,
Mhm.
but overall, I thought it was so much fun,
I agree.
which I didn't think I would be saying about a Shining sequel either.
No, I was pleasantly surprised
I
by it.
was too, yeah. Was this your first time seeing it for this?
Yes.
Mhm.
I hadn't seen it before either. So I was really glad that you suggested to do it for this episode too.
It flew under the radar because you would think a Shining sequel would get so much more attention because that's the sort of cult, like, everyone loves to love The Shining.
Mhm.
And that's what made me maybe not see it, is because I hadn't heard very much about it.
That's what we're here for.
That's what we're here for. We're gonna watch a movie a year later and tell you to watch it.
You know what though? We do have our finger on the pulse of 2020 because the next movie we're going to talk about, we're going to divert from the Halloween scary theme that we've been doing because we have to talk about this. The new Borat sequel that nobody knew was being filmed came out on Amazon last week.
Yes, it did.
Yes, it did. Borat Subsequent Moviefilm. And just before we even get going, I love that they keep changing the title of the movie with the title card in the movie.
Yeah.
We wanted to talk about this because we have to, because Borat was a phenomenon when you and I were in high school.
Yeah.
We are dating ourselves now.
Yeah.
But this was a phenomenon that I don't think people who are young people, the young people today, can appreciate.
I mean, I'm sure they've heard, like, very nice and, like, all that stuff, but they didn't know where it came from.
Mm-hmm. It's just become part of the cultural lexicon at this point.
Was
Saying
it really,
my
like,
wife,
10 years ago?
Oh, it was 2006.
Oh my God. Are you serious?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was more than 10 years ago.
Yes, it was.
Wow, we're old.
Boy, are we. But a lot of those phrases, though, did just become part of what people reference. You know,
Oh.
"Very nice, my wife." Kazakhstan is using "very nice" as their tourist slogan now.
Yeah, they're now embracing it, whereas the first movie, they were suing the crap out of him, and, like, the
Mhm.
people of Kazakhstan hate Borat.
That's the plot of this
Yeah.
movie, is that everyone in Kazakhstan hates Borat because of how he portrayed the country, and so now, 13 years later, Borat gets a chance to redeem himself, and he gets sent on a mission to the United States during 2019 and early 2020, and coronavirus, COVID, does become a plot point in this in a big way. Borat now, his idea to redeem himself and the nation of Kazakhstan to America is to give them a gift, to give the leader of America, Donald Trump, President Donald Trump.
Well, not Donald Trump, it was Mike Pence
It was
because
going to be Donald
yeah.
Trump, but because of the events of Borat where he made Donald Trump angry, he
Yeah.
goes, "Okay, Donald Trump doesn't like me, that's fine. We'll go down the list now. Vice President Mike Pence, we're gonna give him a bribe, we're gonna give him a gift." The twist of the movie is that Borat has a daughter who stows away in the crate, the monkey crate, and might or might not have eaten the monkey on the journey from Kazakhstan.
No, he eats himself.
Who's to say? And his daughter joins him in the antics. Tutor is his daughter's name, played by Maria Baklova, who is so good in this movie and is
She
the
is.
MVP of this movie.
Yeah.
But
And she had to be, right? Because everyone he even says it in the movie, is everyone recognizes me.
everyone knows who I am. They
Yeah.
play on the fact that Borat has become a cultural phenomenon. He can't walk down the street. So he about faces and says, "Okay, my daughter will now be the gift for Mike Pence. I'm going to give her away in a cage to Mike Pence, but he needs to make her appealing." And so a lot of the movie, I was so surprised that there's so much plot in this movie.
That's how he does a very good job at weaving plot into his mockumentary type films.
I was shocked.
It's a new kind of genre that I don't think is like, there's the mockumentary, and then this is like a prank show, but with a storyline.
Much more scripted than the original Borat.
I mean, the first did have a fair amount of plot with him wanting to meet Pamela Anderson and all that, but I agree that it felt as though he was doubling down on that plot device in this. But I also wonder how much of this is planned out ahead of time. Probably not as much, because COVID does play into the plot, and that seems as though it kind of popped up in the middle of production. But do they sort of start off with a general premise, then build off of how each scene plays out?
It feels like this one was a little bit more scripted than Borat. It almost feels like it took more from his subsequent movies, like Bruno and like The Dictator,
I think The
but
Dictator is what it felt most like.
yeah,
Yeah.
but sprinkled in the Borat chaotic nature, kind of blended those things in probably the best way.
No, I agree with
Because
that. Yeah.
I wanted to know what was scripted in this and or not scripted, but set up and what wasn't. Because it's very clear that there are some scenes, and there's a very famous one with Rudy Giuliani that was going around before
Yeah.
this movie came out that is clearly not scripted at all. There's also some that you can tell that are set up in a little bit.
Like the one with the babysitter is somewhat set up.
I was thinking more about the scene. Do you want to go into spoilers right now? Because
We might as well, because it's hard not to with this. This is really funny. I don't think
it's really funny. It's the plot really doesn't matter that much, to be fair.
Yeah, not as much the plot. It's more about spoilers on the punchlines and the funny scenes. It isn't as funny as the original, but it was pretty great.
Could anything, because it's not shocking anymore.
Yeah, true. It had fewer cringy, prankish scenes.
It did. And so much of what Borat was 14 years ago has become normal now.
Yeah, that you can't even repurpose
You can't.
it.
No, you can't. You can't really
Yeah.
repurpose Borat anymore, and they smartly decided to divert that with
Yeah.
including Tudor in there. Who, again, her performance, she deserves an Oscar for standing toe to toe with Sacha Baron Cohen and the improvising and the staying in character the whole time.
Yeah. He was doing an interview with her on, I forgot what show. And so she was asking her, were you nervous about the audition process? What was that like? And she's like, oh, well, he first met me. And then the audition was, we went out and did an actual scene with real people. And he wanted to see if I was believable enough and if I could stay in character the whole way through. And that's how she got the job.
Smart.
Yeah.
I mean, and totally works. And
Mhm.
totally, I mean, she stood with a heavyweight.
Yeah,
in
I bought it. Yeah.
I bought it completely. And so if you're ever going to watch this for her. An incredible performance. It's subversive in that women don't get to be like this.
Well, one of my favorite scenes is one that
the debutante ball.
Yeah, the debutante ball. That was the only time that I actually did lose it. Like, I was just crying. But yeah, let's go into spoilers and then we can,
watch it. If you like Borat, if
you're gonna like it.
You're gonna like this. There's not much else to say there. Was the debutante ball the part where you laughed? Was that your favorite part?
That was my favorite scene because it was exactly my type of humor. It's dark, it's uncomfortable, and it's shocking.
That was clearly not set up. That they didn't tell the people in the audience what was going to happen.
Like, the way that the girl hit her dad when he was talking to Borat, I was like, yeah, this is definitely real. And just the way like, she puts her arms up and you see all the hair under her armpits, and then she like lifts her dress and you're like, no, she's not. And then sure enough, and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe they're doing this. And you see these like conservative high society people just losing their minds.
I think it was interesting that the first Borat showed people at their worst, yes, but also not being able to handle Borat. A lot of this movie was people who were very accepting of Borat. I'm thinking about the guy who runs the fax machine company.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm sitting there going, was this guy at least set up for what was about to happen? Or maybe he's just running a fax machine company and going, no one's come into this store in 3 years. Whatever you want, man. I'll send you whatever.
Here's the thing is people like that I could buy because, especially as like a small business owner, and he's just like, I don't care. Like, no one uses my fax. I might as well get some money out of it. But like, I used to work in the service industry, and you come into contact with so many weird people that I think I probably would have reacted like that guy. I would have just gone with it and like whatever. But it's just odd and confusing enough to prevent the poor guy from calling the cops.
He just kept going back though. Every time he'd get a fax and it'd be like, Borat, if you don't succeed, we will chop off your head and put it on a pike. And he's like, well, that doesn't sound good for you, sir.
Give her to Mike Pence. And like the guy's reading this and he's just like smiling like, what is going on?
And that does happen a lot. You know, the babysitter, Janice, her reaction her reaction, and she gets the most probably emotional scene in the movie when she's talking to Tudor in the car.
Yeah, this had a lot more heart than I was expecting. Like the relationship between Borat and his daughter, and then seeing how it developed was endearing and really sweet. But the babysitter definitely had the most pivotal and emotional scenes.
Although this movie scared me because when Borat is cutting that guy's hair, not when he pulls out not when he pulls out the machete or anything like that. I was like,
no.
Just don't give that guy a bad haircut.
I know. I was so worried. I was like, that poor guy has no idea who is cutting his hair.
I was like, don't mess up that guy's hair.
I know. I felt so bad. I was like, he doesn't have much going for him.
No. But it was funny. Every time Borat would cut off a little piece, he'd go, good. And the guy just kept going with it. He goes, yep. Good. And
that's what I appreciated about this one, because for as much as the first one was taking a peek at the underbelly of America.
Under the surface, just under the surface subtext.
Yeah, subtext that is now kind of out in the open. It almost felt as though he felt the responsibility to show some good. And he actually talks about it in one of the interviews, like the guys that he quarantines with that were teaching him about QAnon and like how the Democrats are eating babies and drinking, like Hillary Clinton,
drink blood.
Yeah, drink the blood and stuff like that. And he was like, those guys were actually really nice. They let me quarantine with them and they were very kind men and helped me, you know, in the context of the film, but they just happened to buy into a really messed up conspiracy theory. And so I think that he also offers a bit of nuance as opposed to like the old film, where the old film was like, look how terrible America is, that kind of thing.
And that's definitely the maturity too of it. And again, it's the same thing that we just mentioned too, is you can't really go back to that. You can't go back to 2006 when everything was a little bit more, is naive the right word? Maybe not, but you can't shock people anymore. So the turn into a story about a father learning to love his, realizing that his daughter doesn't deserve to live in a cage.
Yeah.
Not a huge arc, really. Not a lot of growth, but learns to love her. And she in turn learns that she doesn't need to be in a cage. She doesn't need to live in a cage.
Yeah, you see her. Like, I love that moment in the conservative women's thing where she's like, I put my finger and she like basically tells him that she masturbated for the first time. And the women are like, good for you.
Somebody call her an Uber.
But yeah, oh my God, some of them were so pissed.
There was one woman there who was like, yes, bravo.
So funny. And then just the manual that they keep throwing around is so hilarious.
The cartoon she watches, Queen Melania.
That is my favorite. Like when Donald Trump comes up to her on the balcony.
You know which one really did not, it wasn't even funny, but it was just amazing, was the anti-abortion priest. Was he a priest? I'm not sure.
Yeah, it was like a conservative version of Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, where it's implied that, she swallows a tiny plastic baby that was on a cupcake and goes into them and says, well, we need to get the baby out. It's implied that, Borat as her father knocked her up. And then he's like, nope, it's fine. I don't want to hear about that. We just, we're going to keep that baby inside you. And I was like, oh my God, this is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was the only.
I just want to give my daughter pleasure. And he's like, well, it's a living being that God created. He's like, I don't think it's living. Because this is plastic little baby. It's like, and that's what I'm talking about, is that how do they know that those babies were going to be on those cupcakes? And when they went to that store, did they see them and think, you know what, let's turn this into
a bit.
Yeah. How much of the story was pre-planned? And maybe they just come up with the original premise of his daughter being given to Mike Pence and then seeing where it goes from there.
Right.
I imagine that's the natural progression of filming something like this, which it's so interesting to me is what their process was.
And they did it essentially in secret. Nobody knew this was happening. There was that.
They always have to, right? Because everyone would be expecting it.
There was the incident at the
CPAC.
CPAC. Thank you.
Yeah.
Where
I didn't hear about it. Yeah. But the Secret Service didn't take his ID.
No.
Like, he was talking about in an interview. He's like, Secret Service needs to do better. Like, I hid in the bathroom. I went early in the morning and hid in the bathroom, the both of us. And then then he walks in with like a Klansman outfit. And now CPAC wants to sue him. Funny. Apparently, there's a deleted scene where he got Tutar into the White House.
Yeah.
I want to see that so bad. But it was really funny. Like when he walks into CPAC with her. I don't think it was actually her because you never see her face.
No, it was clearly a dummy.
Yeah.
I don't think they would have exposed her to that. He's fine doing that because, the Secret Service literally could have just jumped on top of him. They would not have made her do that.
He does things that I'm like when he runs into the hotel where Rudy Giuliani was, I'm surprised he didn't get shot because he's running through the lobby toward the elevator
like a crazy person.
Yeah, like I'm very surprised he wasn't just tased or shot on the spot.
Right? I don't know how he got away with this without being in jail.
He got arrested a lot during the first one.
Yeah, he did.
But I love when he walks into the synagogue.
Yeah.
But I think that moment with the old Jewish woman was so sweet, and it was full of heart.
I read an article that is the one time, or one of the very few times, that Sacha Baron Cohen actually broke character to tell this woman, this is just a bit. Don't believe that I believe this. Like, this is a character. We're shooting a movie.
Yeah, and I almost feel as though because he felt a certain
obligation,
but he knows the pain, especially for a woman who went through the Holocaust.
Yeah,
for her to see that, and she was the most empathetic, and that's what I thought was just so beautiful, is that she, if anyone, should be the first to be appalled and upset, but she was almost like, let me help you understand. And I thought that was just so sweet. And it's in those moments that I think separate it from the first one. Because like you said, the production for the first one, all the bigotry and hate existed, but in the shadows. And to make another film that set out to expose it in a time where it is basically out in the open, it would have felt like you were beating a dead horse.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this one showed that there are good people, like the woman in the synagogue, the babysitter, even the QAnon guys, to open their home to a stranger and an obvious foreigner at that. It felt like it was easing the pain of what we're all going through. I liked it.
I'm amazed that this could happen. And the fact that coronavirus is the ending of the movie.
That was like the part where he sees Tom Hanks in Australia.
Oh, I did not see that coming at all. That Borat was the plant for Kazakhstan to infect the world with COVID.
So funny. Oh, God.
I'm so glad that this came out.
Yeah, I am too. I needed a little Borat to ease the pain of 2020. But I think that wraps up Watchlist Volume 9. If you've seen Rebecca, Dr. Sleep, or Borat Subsequent Moviefilm, we would love to hear what you thought and if you agreed or disagreed with anything we discussed. Catch us next week where we'll discuss the first and second season of The Mandalorian following the release of Season 2 this weekend on Disney+. As we've mentioned before, we are shooting to reach 1,000 subscribers on YouTube to become partners, so if you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing. If you have any ideas for a theme you'd like us to discuss, or a film, TV show, anything pop culture, let us know on YouTube, Instagram, or Twitter. You can find all those links on channel8.5.com. That's channel8.5, completely spelled out.com.
We have new episodes every Thursday. Until next time, my name is Joe Galino.
And I'm Andrew Hanna, and this is Channel 8.5.